Okay, everybody, welcome to this discussion of the Bible's advocacy of castration. Castration is advocated in both the Old and New Testaments. This is a very big problem for Bible dupes. Of course, there are a great many more problems with the Bible that Bible dupes have to contend with. But nevertheless, this is a big one because it begs the question, why would Yahweh, who allegedly created male genitals, later decide to advocate on behalf of chopping off the male genitals? Or better yet, if there's supposedly something offensive about them, why did he create them thusly in the first place? After all, Yahweh seemed to be opposed in other parts of the not-so-holy book to disfiguring the the body at all, even condemning getting a tattoo. The body was not to be disfigured at all, according to other biblical passages. For example, Leviticus 19:28 says, "Do not cut your bodies for the dead." Don't put incisions in, making scarring as a sign of this was an ancient practice. When you mourn for the dead, you would create scar tissue on their behalf. Do not cut your body for the dead, right? Do not make these scarrings or tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. So he didn't want scarring, deliberate scarring, and he didn't want tattooing, right? Yahweh didn't want the body disfigured. And yet, we find that he advocated one of the worst disfigurements of all, castration. He either pushed for it or at least allowed it and didn't say anything against castration specifically. And yet, he was opposed to tattooing and deliberate scarring. Sounds a little hypocritical to me, doesn't it? But then again, the whole Bible's hypocritical, right? Thou shalt not kill, and yet there he is commanding the killing of little babies, never mind adults. Of course, he advocates for rape, commands human sacrifice, and on it goes, right? But anyway, let's look at what the Bible has to say about castration or becoming a eunuch. There were three different types of eunuchs in biblical times: those who merely had their testicles removed, those who just removed the penis, and then those who removed both. Initially, eunuchs were made this way by force, since this practice renders its victims more docile and thus more easily controlled. Although some eunuchs weren't so docile, right? I talked about how there was a branch of the insurrectionists who were known to be most violent, who were eunuchs. Josephus talked about them. But anyway, generally they were more docile, and they didn't have any family ties, no commitments, right? So they could be trusted to be more loyal to a king's affairs. The Jews saw this and ran with it. They picked it up and incorporated it into their religion, because the priestly line early on was the most dominant at first. And so they incorporated castration and had Yahweh approve of it because they knew it was effective. They saw how it worked with other cultures. And so they, grabbed it and ran with it and expanded upon it and made it a holy obligation. So let's have a look now at eunuchs in the Bible. As stated, initially castration among the Hebrews appears to have been something that was forced upon them whenever they went into captivity, from outside. But ultimately, it became endorsed and, was embraced as a religious requirement. Isaiah 39 verse 7 says, "And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget," the children that the sons that you'll have, "they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." So Yahweh here is talking about how, because some of the Jews are going to be carried away into captivity in Babylon, they're going to be made into eunuchs. So here's an example of some eunuchs who involuntarily were made such. But we're going to see where it did, in fact, become a religious, well, if not a requirement, it was encouraged anyway. You could enhance your relationship with Yahweh by chopping off your wangy. Jesus was in favor of this in the New Testament. Oh, Bible dupes, you can't squirm out of that one. That's a big fucking problem. Your Jesus, as we have seen in previous videos and we'll see again shortly, your great Jesus was in favor of chopping off the gonads. Funny, though, how you don't see any Christians doing that today. Conveniently, they sweep that one under the rug, along with a whole pile of other passages they've swept under there. Anyway, let's look at Daniel 1 verse 3, which says, "And the king spoke unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes." Now let's look at Daniel 1, 7 and 8. "Unto them the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego, or Abednego." Anyway, it says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself." So he didn't want to, drink wine or eat the king's meat. Apparently he was a vegan. But anyway, notice who was directing all of this. A eunuch, right? Here we see that Daniel, if he was even a real historical character, was apparently made a eunuch when he was bought as a captive into Babylon. This is what was done by Nebuchadnezzar when he took these, took these Hebrews into captivity. He had them castrated, right? This was a common practice in the ancient world. He must have looked at him and said, "Oh, well, you got half your wangies chopped off already anyway, you circumcised numbskulls, so I'll just finish the job, why not, and ensure your loyalties to me. I'll finish the job." Anyway, most certainly Daniel must have been a eunuch, especially where it says that he was taken as an advisor to the king. He was one of the important figures in the king's entourage in his court. So yes, he would have been circumcised along with all the others that were taken into the king's court, into captivity. But notice now, before we get to that, let's take a look at what Josephus said about Daniel, that he was, in fact, a eunuch. He confirms that Daniel was a eunuch. But let's now look at another passage from the book of Daniel. This is very disturbing. Daniel 1 verse 9 says this. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. What? Tender love. Daniel had a tender, loving relationship with the prince of the eunuchs. Is that not fucking bizarre? Is that not fucking twisted? Bible dupes, of course, of necessity, so they can maintain their little fantasy world belief system, will just ignore that or say that, oh no, it doesn't mean what it actually says. No, they have to twist and contort so that Mr. Daniel comes out to look wholly just and righteous, when it's clearly saying here that he had some bizarre, twisted homo fucking relationship with this prince of the eunuchs. So fucking twisted, man. They do the same thing when the Bible says that David loved Jonathan as a man loves a woman. Oh, yeah, they have to twist that one around too. They have to twist where it says that Jesus was alone in the garden with a young boy who was wearing nothing but a loincloth. And when they came to arrest Jesus, he ran away naked. They have to reinvent that and twist that. Or when it says that the disciple whom Jesus loved was reclining on his breast, and how Peter had to ask this disciple who had a special relationship with Jesus a question that he didn't think Jesus would answer him directly, but figured he would answer this special disciple that Jesus had a special loving relationship with. So he had that disciple ask the question for him. They sweep all that under the rug so they can maintain their little fantasy belief that the Bible doesn't advocate homosexuality at all. And sure, they'll cite some passages that absolutely condemn homosexuality. But obviously, some of its great icons were homosexuals, Bible fucking dupes. Just like your Bible condemns murder, but Yahweh commanded the murder of little babies. Your book is bullshit. It's absolute 101% fucking hypocrisy. Or as I like to say, it's a schizophrenic book with a schizophrenic message and a schizophrenic God. And if you continue to follow it, if you're not already, you'll ultimately be schizophrenic yourself. Anyway, so Daniel must have been a personal sex slave of this prince of the eunuchs. But notice, it doesn't just say that Daniel entered into favor and tender love with the prince of eunuchs of his own accord. It said God had brought him to that position. God brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. God arranged this cozy little loving relationship. God damn, makes you want to fucking puke. Esther 4, verses 4 and 5. Esther, you know, the Megillah scroll, from whence the Purim celebration comes from. Esther 4, verses 4 and 5 says, quote, when Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So here again we see another reference reference to eunuchs that were working directly under Queen Esther, the Jewess Queen Esther, if she ever existed. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. Bible dupes accept this as real history. Okay, fine, it's real history. But why is it endorsing the practice of gonad removal? But here, the impression is clear that she had her own emasculated male drone eunuchs that bowed to her every whim. If she was in fact a godly woman, there's no way we can know because we don't have the word God mentioned anywhere in the entire book of Esther. It's a totally secular book. Nevertheless, Bible dupes across the board, Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, accept her as a godly woman because this book wound up in the godly book called the Bible. So we have to assume that Yahweh had no problem with her having her servants get their gonads chopped, right? Why should we assume that Yahweh was against it? Jesus was all for it. As I've already pointed out in previous videos, we'll be looking at that passage again soon. Anyway, in the following 4 passages, we discover that eunuchs had become quite a common feature within the borders of ancient Israel. Let's start with Jeremiah 29:2. It says, after that, Jeremiah, the king and the queen, and the eunuchs, the princes of Judah and Jerusalem, and the carpenters and the synths were departed from Jerusalem. Notice, very casually, it mentions the eunuchs, the princes of Judah and Jerusalem, blah, 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 blah. So in the royal court in Jerusalem, royal court, it was a fucking local tribal chieftain that ruled over the miserable fuckwads called the Jews. Anyways, they had eunuchs as well. And here is the great prophet Jeremiah making reference to this. How come Jeremiah didn't say any words of condemnation here for the practice of chopping off gonads? Because it wasn't frowned upon by Mr. Yahweh, by the entire priesthood. They saw other cultures doing it and realized, hey, we got to do this as well. That's a great idea. And so they didn't have their God protest it because it was accepted across the board. Big problem for you Bible dupes. Your great Yahweh didn't inform Jeremiah to condemn castration, did he now? Here's another one, also from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 34, verse 19. It says, the princes of Judah and the princes of Jerusalem, the eunuchs and the priests and all of the people of the land, blah, 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 blah. So here again, we see eunuchs being mentioned casually without condemnation and indicating that this was indeed a common practice at the time, right there in Judah, in Jewland. Jeremiah 38, verse 7 likewise says, now when Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs which was in the king's house, heard that they had put Jeremiah in the dungeon, the king then sitting in the gate of Benjamin, blah, 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 blah. So here we have yet another reference to, in this case, it was an Ethiopian, but that's because supposedly this Ethiopian had been taken in as a servant and was required to be castrated. So Jew or Gentile, it doesn't matter. They had their servants castrated, a common practice in frickin' Jewland. Jeremiah 41:16 says, then took Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all of the captives of the forces that were with him, all of the remnant of the people whom he had recovered from Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, from Mizpah. After that, he had slain Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, even mighty men of war, and the women, and the children, and the eunuchs, whom he had bought again from Gibeon. Once again, eunuchs is mentioned casually, without any word of condemnation. It was a common practice. It's clear from these last several passages that the Hebrews had adopted forced castration, seeing what an effective tool it was, for controlling their minions, both foreigners and natives, right? But by the time we get to the New Testament, it wasn't just a forced practice, it became voluntary. The priesthood had adopted it, and Christ endorsed the damn practice. Anyway, before we get to that, let's look at Isaiah 56, verses 4 and 5. For this is what the Lord says to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose what pleases me and hold fast to my covenant. To them I will give within my temple and its walls memorial and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will endure forever. Here Yahweh is talking about how he's going to welcome eunuchs into his temple. He's not condemning eunuchs or the practice of castration. He's embracing it, and he's saying that he's going to welcome eunuchs into his temple. This is very disturbing. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. In the book of Deuteronomy 23, verse 1, we read this bullshit. If a man's testicles are crushed or his penis is cut off, he may not be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. Did you catch that? Did you catch that? Here Yahweh is condemning castration, right? So much so that you were considered unclean if you had your wee-wee or your testicles or your danky-donglers lopped off. So you weren't allowed to go into Yahweh's holy assembly. You weren't admitted into his tabernacle, the early version of the temple, right? And yet, in the book of Isaiah, Yahweh is saying, hey, no problem if you get gonads chopped off. I'll give you a name even greater than if you were my son. What a bunch of fucking bullshit. Look at this hypocritical goddamn crap, man. So which is it? Is Yahweh for or against chopping off your gonads? Obviously, early on, he was against it, or the priesthood was. But as time went on, they saw, hey, wait, this is a good idea. Yeah, let's have them chop off their wangies. We'll have more loyalty from them. Now, Mr. Yahweh, who the Bible says never changes his mind, did change his mind now, didn't he? Kind of like how all throughout the Torah, Yahweh is commanding sacrifice, right? Blood here, blood there, sprinkle it here, dangle it, on the temple walls, and on and on and on, right? Sprinkle it around the altar 7 times, put it on the right toe of your, big toe of your right foot, on the thumb of your right hand. Remember that shit? Couldn't get enough of the blood. It's a sweet-smelling savor unto the Lord for the burnt offerings, and on and on and on. And yet, you come over to the book of Ezekiel chapter 20, and Yahweh actually says, I did not command your forefathers to offer sacrifice, neither did it enter into my mind. Whee! What a fucking circus ride. Holy shit. Bible dupes. Are you embarrassed yet that you actually wave that book in the air and act like it has something good to offer? Act like it even makes fucking sense? It constantly contradicts itself. Yahweh constantly changes his mind, and yet he says he doesn't change his mind. Get the fuck out of here. You are so fucking stupid. And I can say that because I used to be one of you. I was once very fucking stupid, just like you. But there's hope. I snapped out of it and realized it not only wasn't worthy of my belief, it's a fucking raging shit rag. But anyway, check it out. Yahweh would not allow you into his little holy place, his little holy tabernacle, if you had your gonads removed. And yet, later in the book of Isaiah, oh, I don't care if you have gonads removed. Why, I'll give you a higher place in my holy temple if you have your gonads removed. What a bunch of fucking bullshit, man. Yahweh changed his mind again. And now suddenly he's in favor of eunuchs, in favor of chopping off the gonads. We know that's the case of the book of Daniel too, right? Where it says that Yahweh placed Daniel in special favor with the prince of the eunuchs, who had tender love for him. Probably sat back and watched as they engaged in their little trysts. Although without gonads, I don't know how much fun they could have had. But anyway, Yahweh was into that kind of thing. He liked eunuchs. And even though he despised the whole concept early on, right? It would only make sense that Yahweh would despise chopping off your gonads early on, because also in the Torah, as we just read a little while back, Yahweh didn't even want you getting a tattoo or scarring yourself for the dead, right? He wasn't against mutilation of the body at all, although he had no problem chopping off the foreskin. But other than that, nope, no disfigurement unless I command it. But later, the one who doesn't change his mind changed his mind, didn't he? What a joke. Bible dupes, you don't even understand your own book, and that's why you believe it. If you did understand it, you wouldn't be believing it anymore, because you'd realize, holy shit, this thing is fucking full of crap. It totally contradicts itself on major issues. It's God contradicts himself while claiming that he never changes his mind. He changes his mind constantly in 180 degrees the opposite fucking direction. That's why you believe this book, because you don't even understand what the fuck it says. So it's obvious that this transition from rejecting to accepting, castration as a normal practice took place sometime in the last several centuries BC. And by the time of Christ, it was not only accepted and tolerated, it was pushed for, encouraged. And here we see it with the great Jesus in Matthew 19:12, saying this: "For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb," right? People who don't have a sex organ, or whose sex organ is mutilated, or hermaphrodites who you can't tell what they're supposed to be because they have two fucking organs, right? And then there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, forced, like in the king's court, right? Forced to become eunuchs. And also, he said, there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs voluntarily for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Here Christ is all for becoming a eunuch for the kingdom of heaven's sake. Can you believe this shit? Here the great Jesus, or Yahweh Jr., is actually encouraging men to chop off their donkey danglers. Bible dupes, are you fucking paying attention? This is one of those passages that you like to sweep under the rug. Well, there's no sweeping it under the rug, baby. There it is in your face. Oh, there's a great many other troubling passages, things that are attributed to Jesus that he said and did that are very problematic. But this is a big one right here, isn't it? Why was the supposed co-creator of the male sex organs here advocating for chopping them off for the kingdom of heaven's sake? This is fucking disgusting. And if you're so much for the great Jesus and everything he taught, why aren't you, or at least some of you anyway, chopping off your gonads so that you can better serve the Lord? Paul was apparently all for this too, right? He talked about following his example, not being married. Paul most likely was a eunuch, the way that he talked, right? He said that unless you burn with lust, be like me and don't get married. So we're to assume that he didn't burn with lust. Well, I mean, it's fucking natural to burn with lust, right? Even in your sleep, you have fucking nocturnal emissions, right? It's normal, it's healthy, it's natural. There's something wrong with you if you don't, right? That's just the way it is. That's the way the human body is designed. Supposedly, Yahweh was the designer. Isn't that interesting? He designed us to function this way so that we have uncontrollable, passions like that, right? The sexual drive is the most powerful drive, of human nature. And yet the Bible condemns it as fucking something evil. So evil that you should chop your gonads off so that doesn't distract you away from serving the Lord. What a fucking joke, man. But Jesus encouraged this, Bible dupes. There's a lot of you out there who have given your lives to the ministry. Not you, my listeners, but, a lot of idiots out there in Bible dupedom world who, have dedicated your life to the service of the Lord. And yet, damn well, you have temptations, right? You have dreams that you have no control over. Why don't you do as Jesus said so that doesn't get in your way anymore? And so you don't have to keep asking for forgiveness for naughty dreams you had the night before. Why don't you just chop the fucking shit off and be done with it? You won't have those temptations anymore. You won't have those dreams anymore. And then you can serve the Lord better. Jesus encouraged you to do it. Why aren't you doing it? Because it's fucking bullshit, but you won't admit it. You not only won't admit it, but you make up bullshit to try to explain away, passages like this. Anyway, and don't forget, Josephus talked about how there was a branch of insurrectionists in the first century who practiced castration. They were the most violent, the most ruthless of all of the insurrectionists. And so for Christ to be encouraging that, he most likely was one of those castration cult, followers. Maybe he didn't have his gonads chopped off because it appears he had something going on with Mary Magdalene, but he encouraged his followers to do that, didn't he? Anyway. But no surprise, today we have the LGBT community encouraging kids to chop off their little fucking wangies, right? It's all Jew orchestrated, is it not? Of course it is. It's Jew media that pushes this. They were trying, under Biden to, in fact, in California, they did achieve that, right? To make it illegal for parents to try to stop their kids from pursuing transgender operations and whatnot, right? To make it out like you're an abusive parent. Of course, you think Trump gives a shit about stopping that? No, he's just doing it because his constituents want that. So he's got to make it look good. Don't worry, the pendulum will swing back in favor of this shit when they get another fucking Democrat in there. This is the game they play. Back and forth. They don't care that one group is against it because they know that a few years later, they'll push it again. Just like, they got to at least seem like they're against mass migrations of illegals now. And notice how he's going to the very opposite. He's not just saying no more illegals coming into the country and we're going to go after those who are on the street and raising the crime rates. No, across the board, carte blanche. He's sending people over that wind up, in horrible circumstances, sending them out into, drug dealer infested countries where they're going to probably get fucking killed or caught up in some sex slave trade. Maybe Trump is directly helping to facilitate that. Who knows? In any case, look how the left and right work in tandem, right? The left was actually setting these people up so the right could come along later and get them caught up in shit like that, right? Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me, man. And look how people are so ignorant of this shit. Whether the lefties or righties, They're falling for the paradigm, for the little pendulum swing game. They're both partners in fucking crime. You set things up for me so when I come into power, I can pick up where you left off and make it look like I'm opposed to you, but I'm actually working with you toward the same agenda. We're all working for the same Jewish crime bosses. Hardy har har har. Anyway. But the modern militant transgender movement is as Jewish as a fucking bagel shop, right? Following along with their age-old traditions dating back to the time of the not-so-holy book. And too bad for you Bible dupes, you can't make the claim that, oh, well, that was just the Old Testament. Bullshit. The New Testament is in even more favor of gonad chopping than the Old Testament. Interestingly, when Paul came along, he didn't advocate openly castration like Christ did, right? Don't forget, as I pointed out a while back when I did a series called St. Paul the Huckster, Paul contradicted a lot of shit that Christ said, totally contradicted. So we shouldn't be surprised that the advice he gave was much different. Check out what he wrote in 1 Corinthians 7, verses 7 to 9. He said, I wish that all of you were as I am, meaning unmarried. Now to the unmarried and the widows, I say this. It is good for them to stay unmarried as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Did you catch that? Paul is saying here, it's better for you to be like me and just not be married. But if you are too tempted in that direction, if you're burning with lust, well, then get married. It's better to be married than to burn with passion. Paul is saying here that that's the only motive for you to get married. If you can't control yourself, then, get married so you can relieve your sexual frustrations. Nothing about, if you fall in love with a woman and want to raise a beautiful family together, then it's a good idea to get married. No. That doesn't enter into the equation at all. He's simply saying get married as a means of avoiding, lustful thoughts and holy fucking shit. Why didn't he just say get castrated like Jesus said? You know why? Because the Jesus character, as we now see it in the Gospels, was not invented yet. Sure, the actual person that the Christ character was based upon, Judas Christus, had lived and died. Well, not died yet by this point. He didn't die until the Jewish-Roman War. But his storyline had not yet been invented. So Paul, of course, didn't know anything about Christ teaching, advocating for castration. So, that's the main reason why we see Paul contradicting so much of what Christ taught. Paul didn't know what Christ taught. That shit wasn't invented until decades later, after Paul was fucking dead and buried. But nevertheless, this is Paul's answer. He didn't say castrate yourselves so you're not tempted with sexual lusts. He simply said remain unmarried, be celibate. And this, of course, is where the idea comes from in the Catholic Church of the priesthood being celibate. Paul didn't say, though, that it was a requirement. He didn't say you had to be celibate, right? He encouraged it. The Catholic Church came along and said, nope, it's absolutely required. And what has resulted over the centuries from this requirement of celibacy? Why, rape of women in the confessionals, rape of children, and the church covering it up, right? What an abomination, man. And all at the hand of the Jew. All of this fucking abominable shit has come from them, guys. Them in their not-so-holy book. Anyway, guys, that concludes that discussion. So there you go, Bible dupes out there. You should be getting castrated, or else you're not following
the world's greatest teacher who ever lived.
He encouraged chopping off the gonads. So I expect to see a lot of you Christians out there now, a lot of you men, speaking with high voices and joining the Glee Club. All right, guys. Lots more to come. Thanks for joining me. We'll catch you in the next video. Take care.